I am Silas Thorne, 75 years old, and for the first time in my life I don't trust my own eyes. Last night I found the bug. A flat, modern sliver no bigger than a fingernail, painted gold and pressed into the original 17th century frame of the Little Virgin and Child. A painting only 3 living souls are permitted to touch: Victor, Karina, and me. One of them put it there. Welcome to Brian Stories. I share new life stories here every day, and I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Drop a comment down below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I read every single comment and it helps me to know I'm not alone in this. I sat in the dark gallery until the grandfather clock struck 4. Holding a cup of chamomile, Victor had just brought me. The tea is cold now. I never took a sip. After my wife Clara died, I thought I would die too, right there in the marble hallway, holding her cold hands that used to be warm. But the paintings waited for me. They do not judge. They simply hang and watch. Then came Karina. She was 4 years old the first time she visited, clutching her mother's skirt, eyes huge at the colors exploding on every wall. When her father stormed out of my life for the last time, shouting that money had turned me into stone, he left Karina behind like forgotten luggage. I kept her for a weekend. The weekend became a summer. The summer became every school holiday. Every Christmas, every moment I could steal. I taught her how to hold a magnifying glass, how to see the tiny crackle in real varnish, how to feel the difference between love and paint. She would fall asleep on the sofa with her head in my lap while I whispered stories about artists who starved so the world could have beauty. In the mornings, she ran barefoot across the terraces, calling Grandpa Silas so loudly that even the pelicans turned their heads. Victor came to us 28 years ago. His wife had just passed. His children lived far away, and he answered an advertisement for a butler who did not mind isolation. He arrived with 1 suitcase and perfect manners. He stayed. He became the shadow that made sure tea was hot. Medicine was taken. Storms were prepared for. When Karina grew older and started driving down from Miami alone, Victor always had her favorite lemon cake waiting. She kissed his cheek and called him Uncle Vic. He pretended to be embarrassed, but his eyes shone. For a long time I told myself this was enough. 1 old man, 1 faithful servant, 1 bright granddaughter who still needed me. A small kingdom but mine. I hung a photograph in the main hall in the middle. Karina on my right with her arm around my neck. Victor on my left, hand gently on my shoulder. All of us smiling at the camera as if we would stay frozen that way forever. Perfect composition, perfect light, perfect lie. But I will find out. Before this weekend is over, I will know whose hand slipped the blade between my ribs and painted it gold to match the frame. And when I do, even the paintings will look away. The morning after I found the listening device, the sun rose exactly the way it has risen here for 50 years. Slow, pink, and lazy over the Gulf. I stood on the veranda with a cup of coffee I could not taste and watched Karina's white convertible wind its way up the long shell driveway. The palm trees bowed a little in the breeze, as if they too wanted to greet her. Grandpa Silas. Her voice floated across the gravel like birdsong. She ran the last few steps and threw herself against my chest. I felt her heartbeat through the thin cotton, quick and warm, the same heartbeat I used to race when she was 6 and afraid of thunder. Victor appeared at the front door, calm and perfect as always, carrying the small leather suitcase she likes. "Welcome home, Miss Karina," he said, the corners of his mouth lifting just enough. She left my arms to kiss his cheek. "Uncle Vic, I swear you get more handsome every time I come." He gave the tiniest shake of his head, the way he has done since she was 10 and teasing him, but his eyes softened. We moved inside together, the 3 of us, the way we have done hundreds of times. Karina slipped her arm through mine and rested, her head on my shoulder as we walked toward the main salon. "I missed you so much," she murmured. Miami is loud and stupid. Here it smells like peace. I petted her hand. My fingers felt thick and clumsy against her skin. Victor poured fresh orange juice into the crystal, glasses that belonged to my mother. The ice clinked softly. Sunlight poured through the tall windows and painted moving gold on the walls, on the Monet water lilies, on the small Rembrandt portrait of a boy with serious eyes. Karina sat on the ottoman at my feet, the way she did when she was little, knees together, hands folded, looking up at me with that smile that always made the world feel safe again. "Tell me you've been eating," she said. "Victor, has he been eating?" Victor allowed himself half a smile. "He eats when he remembers, miss." She laughed, bright and clear. "Then I'm staying all week to make sure he remembers." I watched them, my granddaughter and my oldest friend, moving around me like planets that had never left their orbit. Victor placed a plate of sliced mango beside her. She fed me a piece to me the way she did when her hands were sticky and small. I opened my mouth without thinking. The fruit was cold and sweet. For one long minute, everything looked exactly the way it was supposed to look. The perfect family picture, framed in sunlight and laughter. Karina reached into a canvas bag for her phone, probably to show me photographs of the new apartment she just rented. She tapped the screen awake. I saw it happen in the space of a single heartbeat. Her smile froze. Her thumb hovered. The screen lit up with a message in a green bubble, no name blocked, only a string of numbers and symbols encrypted. The kind of message normal 26-year-old girls do not receive at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning while feeding mango to their grandfather. She recovered instantly, locked the phone, and slipped it back into the bag. But I saw. She leaned forward and wrapped her arms around my neck again, pressing her cheek to mine. "I love you, Grandpa Silas," she whispered. Fierce and quick, the way children do when they sense a storm coming. Her hair brushed my face. Her phone, now face down on the ottoman, buzzed once more, silent but insistent, like something alive trying to crawl out. Victor stood behind her, hands clasped, expression gentle and unchanged. The afternoon settled into that heavy, golden quiet that only comes after a storm has passed but before the next one gathers. Karina had gone upstairs to rest. Victor and I moved through the house the way we have for decades. Silent, practiced, never needing to speak. Yet today, every footstep sounded like a question. I asked him to follow me into the North Gallery, the room that holds the Medusa. Not many people have ever seen it. A small Caravaggio, barely larger than a dinner tray, painted in 1597, Perseus holding the severed head, the snakes still writhing, blood dripping into the dark water below. The face of Medusa is so alive that visitors sometimes step back without meaning to. I bought it 35 years ago in a private salle in Geneva. The insurance value today is $180 million. But money has never been the point. The point is that it is the last thing I would ever sell. I walked straight to the painting and stood on its own easel under a single spotlight. "Victor," I said, keeping my voice low, "I want to increase the rider on the Medusa. Double it, triple it, whatever they will allow." He lifted one eyebrow, the smallest movement. "May I ask why now, sir?" "Because I am old," I answered, "and because I finally understand something I should have understood the day I brought this painting home." I turned to face him fully. "The true value is not in the painting, Victor. The true value is in the people you trust, too. Protect it." I let the words hang between us like incense. He did not look away. His eyes were the same steady gray they have always been. But for the first time in 28 years, could not read them. I went on. "If something happens to me, this canvas must stay exactly where it is. Not sold to no one, moved by no one, photographed by no one. Unless you and Karina both sign the papers. Together, I will change the policy tomorrow." Victor inclined his head. "Of course, sir. I will prepare the paperwork tonight." I stepped closer to the painting. The spotlight made the blood drops glisten like wet rubies. "Do you remember the day we installed it?" asked softly. "I remember every day, sir. We carried it together. You held the bottom, I held the top. We did not speak. We did not need to. I thought, this man will guard this painting with his life, the way he has guarded mine." Victor's throat moved once. He said he had never forgotten that moment either. I reached out and touched the gilded frame, where the hidden listening device had been on that other painting. I continued that I was adding a new clause. If anything happened to me, the painting would immediately be placed in a security vault in Zurich. Only he had the safe code containing the eyes' transfer codes. I pointed to the small floor safe and said he would open it only for Karina, and only when she was with him in person. No electronic signatures or exceptions. Victor's eyes flickered just for a heartbeat toward that safe. It was a fleeting glance, but I saw it. That glance told me everything I needed to know. "Yes, sir," he said smoothly. "I will make the call tonight." He turned to leave. At the door, he paused to ask if Karina would be joining us for dinner on the terrace. I said I hoped so. He nodded and walked out, his shoes silent. I remained alone with the Medusa. The snakes seemed to move when I wasn't looking, directly at them. That night I did not sleep. I sat in the library with every ledger, every insurance rider, every inventory photograph spread across the mahogany tables that once belonged to a Venetian doge. The house was dark except for the green glow of my desk lamp. Outside, the moon laid a silver road across the water, straight to the horizon, as if inviting me to run. I did not run. I turned pages. By 3 a.m, I found the first lie, a small Cézanne still life, apples and a white jug, photographed for the 2022 update, showed brush strokes that were too even, too clean. I pulled the painting off the wall myself, heart hammering, and held it under the ultraviolet. The signature fluoresced wrong, a perfect forgery, but a forgery. Someone had swapped it sometime in the last 18 months. Then I found another, and another, 5 paintings in total, scattered across 3 galleries, replaced with copies so brilliant only I would ever notice. The insurance had been paid on the originals. The premiums were current. Someone was waiting for me to die so they could discover the theft, collect hundreds of millions, and walk away untouched. I sat back in the leather chair and felt the room tilt. All the air left my lungs. I had spent my life hunting fakes, and the greatest fake of all had been living under my roof, smiling at my table, kissing my cheek. At dawn, I found Victor in the pantry counting silver. I placed the 5 inventory photographs in front of him like playing cards. "I want a surprise insurance audit," I said. My voice sounded like gravel. "Full team. Next week, no warning. Tell them I'm updating my will and need current valuations." Victor looked at the photographs. He did not flinch, but the small muscle in his jaw moved. "Of course, sir," he answered. "I will telephone London this morning. They can be here Wednesday." "Good," I said. "Tell Karina nothing yet. I want to watch her face when the auditors walk in." He bowed and left. I watched him go and wondered how many mornings he had bowed exactly like that while planning my ruin. The day passed in slow, poisonous sunshine. Karina swam in the pool, laughing when the dolphins appeared beyond the breakers. She made Victor take photographs of us on the terrace, her arm around my neck, my hand on her warm shoulder. I smiled for the camera the way a dying man smiles at his last birthday cake. Every click of the shutter felt like another nail. Late afternoon. I pretended to nap in the East Salon. I left the connecting door to the small Dutch gallery cracked open. I waited. At 4:30, I heard the soft pad of bare feet. Karina's feet. She thought I was asleep. She slipped inside, phone already at her ear, voice low and rapid, and nothing like the voice that calls me Grandpa. "Yes, the Cézanne and the 2 Impressionists are clean. Swaps," she whispered. "No, the Medusa is still original." He's talking about a surprise audit next week. We have to move the rider increase through before they arrive. Lloyd's will pay out on the declared value, not replacement, if the loss is discovered post-mortem. We stay on schedule. Silence. She listened. I know the risk. Just make sure the appraiser you send is ours. And tell Victor the new policy language needs to list him as co-beneficiary on the rider. He's old. He'll sign anything I put in front of him. She ended the call. I stayed perfectly still behind the half-closed door, counting her breaths. She stood in front of the little Dutch flower, painting for a long time, head bowed, fingers pressed to her lips the way she used to do when she was small and trying not to cry. Then she walked out, closing the door softly. The way you close the door on someone you have just killed. I waited another 5 minutes. Then I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the perfect blue sea. The next morning the sky was the color of a bruise. I stood on the front steps pretending to watch. The gardeners trimmed the bougainvillea, while every nerve in my body waited for the sound I knew would come. It came at 10:30, the low growl of an engine that had no business on my private road. A dusty black rental car lurched through the gates and stopped crookedly on the gravel. The driver's door opened and Leonard stepped out. He looked like a stranger wearing my son's face, thinner, eyes red-rimmed, cheeks hollow, hair too long and greasy. The expensive watch I gave him for his 30th birthday was gone. In its place, a cheap plastic thing that looked like it came from a gas station. He wore the same leather jacket he left in 20 years ago, now cracked and sun-bleached. He did not smile. He looked like a man who had not slept in days. Karina was in the pool. Victor was inside. I was alone with the ghost I had buried. He climbed the steps 2 at a time, breathing hard. Dad. His voice cracked on the word. I need to talk to you. Inside, please. I did not move. You have not called me Dad in 23 years. You lost the right. The day you screamed that I loved paintings more than my own blood. He flinched as if I had struck him. I know what I said. I need money. 50,000. Cash. Today, Leonard's hand trembled, real fear pouring out. I studied him slowly. I asked if he had driven all the way from his hiding place to beg me for money. He replied he wouldn't be here if there was any other way. I countered that there was always another way, but he never liked honest work. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a desperate hiss, pleading with me to help because they would kill him if he didn't pay them by tomorrow night. I asked who they were. He glanced over his shoulder and said they were people I didn't want to know. I laughed shortly and bitterly, telling him to try me, because I had just discovered 5 of my paintings were fakes and someone in the house had put them there. So I figured I could handle his gambling debts. His face changed, the panic quickly replaced by something colder. You know about the swaps? I know. Enough. He closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, they were wet. Then you know this isn't about gambling. I didn't come here to steal from you. I came here because I'm trying to stop it. I said nothing. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded envelope. Hands trembling so badly the paper rattled. I have proof, names, accounts, dates, everything. But I need to stay alive long enough to use it. 50,000 buys me 48 hours. I stared at the envelope. I stared at my son. All the old rage rose in my throat like bile. Your fraud has harmed the entire family. I said, ice in every syllable. You think you can walk back in here? Wave some papers, and I opened the safe because you finally grew a conscience. Get off my island. I turned to go inside. He grabbed my arm. His fingers dug in like claws. You don't understand what I'm up against, he whispered fiercely. If I disappear, Karina goes down with me. And Victor too. And you lose everything. I'm not the villain here, Dad. I'm the only one trying to keep you alive. I looked down at his hand on my sleeve, and it let go as if my arm had burned him. We stood there, father and son, while the bruised sky pressed lower and the first large drops of rain began to fall. I felt the ground shift beneath me, because for the first time in 23 years, Leonard had called me Dad twice in 5 minutes, and the horror in his eyes looked real. The rain came down in sheets now, drumming on the veranda roof like impatient fingers. Leonard and I stood under the overhang, soaked to the skin, while thunder rolled across the gulf. I held the envelope he had tried to give me. Inside were printouts, bank transfers, shell companies registered in Cyprus, emails that mentioned my paintings by name. His handwriting shook on every margin note. I hated that it looked real. I had 2 clear paths in front of me, and both felt like walking off a cliff. Path 1. I could call the sheriff on the mainland right now. I had the listening device, the forged inventory photographs, Karina's overheard conversation, enough for search warrants. By tomorrow morning, Karina and Victor would be in handcuffs. The auditors would confirm the swaps. The insurance company would freeze everything, and the story would end with my granddaughter's mugshot on the evening news. I pictured her crying in an orange jumpsuit, calling for me, and my stomach turned to stone. Path 2. I could believe even a sliver of what Leonard was saying. Use him. Let him run with the 50,000. Follow the money. See whose hands it lands in. If he was lying, I would know exactly where he would go with my cash. If he was telling the truth, then Karina and Victor were only pawns, and the real monster was still hiding. I looked at my son. Rain ran down his face like tears he was too proud to shed. Tell me one thing, I said. Did you help them swap the paintings? He met my eyes. Yes. The single word hit harder than any fist. But not for money, he added quickly. They have someone. I had no choice. I laughed, a cracked sound. Everyone always has a choice, Leonard. You simply made the wrong one. Lightning flashed, illuminating the entire island for a second. In that moment, I saw the boy Leonard used to be, the one who cried over a stray cat and begged to sleep in the gallery. Then the thunder swallowed the memory. I thought of Karina upstairs, humming, of Victor polishing silver and humming the same old tune, and of the 25 years I believed I had built something unbreakable. I had made my choice. I walked inside without a word. Leonard followed, dripping water onto the marble floor. I walked inside without a word. Leonard followed, dripping on the marble. In the library, I opened the safe behind the false panel, the one only I know exists. I took out a thick envelope, 50,000 in hundreds, and a cheap burner phone still in its plastic. Leonard stared at the money as if it were burning. I forbade him from thanking or explaining, and ordered him to leave immediately. I warned him that if he was lying, he should pray they killed him quickly, because what I would do would be worse. He swallowed, nodded, and turned to leave. At the door, he stopped and whispered that he knew I hated him, but he was trying to make things right, swearing on Mother's grave. Then he vanished, his car speeding down the driveway into the storm. I stood in the empty hallway. Karina's laughter drifted down the stairs, and Victor's shoes clicked somewhere in the distance. I realized I had just handed $50,000 and my only son to the wolves, or I had given the wolves exactly what they needed to lunge straight for my throat. Either way, the wrong choice would create chaos, and I had just created it. The days after Leonard vanished into the storm blurred into a strange, brittle calm that felt like the hush before a hurricane makes landfall, and everyone pretends the sky is only being dramatic. I moved through the house with the careful smile of a man who has decided to set his own funeral pyre and light the match himself, speaking gently to Karina about how perhaps it was time to let a few smaller pieces go to museums, watching Victor's face for the flicker that would tell me he had already taken the bait I had, cast into the darkest waters of the art world. 3 nights later, while thunder muttered far out over the gulf and the air smelled of wet palm and ozone, I sat alone in the conservation studio under a single green banker's lamp and finished the last careful touch on the fake Monet sketch. I sealed it in an acid-free crate marked with the discreet logo of the Geneva auction house, addressed it to a blind shipping agent in Miami, and instructed Victor to have it collected at dawn the next day, telling him with the weary sigh of an old man, finally surrendering, that I wished to surprise Karina with a generous trust fund before my heart gave out entirely. Victor bowed, murmured that he would personally oversee the shipment, and for one heartbeat his gaze lingered on the crate the way a starving man lingers on bread. I saw it, and I knew the hook was set deep, far to the north, in a city already surrendering to winter. Leonard had followed my instructions to the imitu letter. He had found Astrid exactly where I told him she would be, inside a narrow brick building that used to be a church and now served soup and second chances to anyone who lined up before the doors opened at 11. She had lost weight, cut her hair short, and wore no makeup. Yet when she turned from the steam table with a tray of macaroni in her hands, Leonard still felt the same punch to the chest he had felt the first time she smiled at him 20 years earlier. He waited until the last child left, then stepped into the fluorescent light and spoke the only words that would make her listen. Astrid, Silas knows about the swaps. He's fighting back, but he needs you. The boy is in danger. She set the tray down so carefully that not one noodle slid. Yet her hands trembled all the same. Then she wiped her palms on her apron and said, very quietly, "Follow me, not here." They walked through the kitchen, past the industrial dishwasher still dripping, into a cramped office that smelled of coffee, grounds, and bleach. She closed the door, leaned against it as though to keep the whole world out, and finally looked at him, really looked. "Start talking, Leonard," she said, voice low and steady, the voice she had once used in boardrooms when billions were on the line. "And if one word of this is a lie, I will walk out and you will never find me again." He told her everything in a rush. When he finished, the silence stretched so long he thought she would indeed open the door and vanish forever. Instead, she reached into her apron pocket and drew out a small silver locket on a worn chain. She opened it with shaking fingers. Inside was a photograph of a dark-haired child, no older than 6, smiling with one front tooth missing. Leonard's knees nearly gave way. "This is why I disappeared," Astrid whispered. "This is why I became Elena, who serves soup and sleeps in a studio the size of a closet. They told me if I ever surfaced, if I ever used my real name again, they would make him disappear the way his mother did." Leonard reached out, not quite touching the locket. "I didn't know," he said, voice breaking. "I swear on my life I didn't know he existed, until 3 months ago." Astrid's eyes filled, but her jaw stayed hard. "Then help me keep him alive. Help Silas. Because if they get the Medusa, the boy dies, and everything we sacrificed will have been for nothing." Leonard nodded, throat working. "Tell me what you need." She was about to answer when the burner phone in his pocket buzzed once, my signal that the crate had left the island. He pulled it out, read the message, and felt the blood drain from his face. "They're moving faster than we thought," he said. Astrid took a steadying breath, wiped her eyes, and reached for her coat. "Then we move faster," she answered, and for the first time in 5 years, Leonard heard the woman he had married, steel under silk, unbreakable. They stepped out the back door together into the alley, Leonard 1 pace behind, already rehearsing the words that would convince her to trust him one last time. He reached for the handle of the kitchen door, to hold it open for her the way he always used to. A black van with no plates screeched around the corner, tires smoking, and slammed to a stop directly in front of them. The black van's door hung open like a mouth, but no one stepped out. Instead, 2 men in cheap overcoats simply stared at Leonard and Astrid with the flat, patient eyes of men who have done this many times before and never failed. One lifted a phone, took a photograph of them both, and only then did the driver rev the engine once, a warning growl that rattled the dumpster beside them. Then the van rolled away as silently as it had arrived, leaving only the smell of hot brakes in the echo of Astrid's sharp inhale. Leonard tried to speak, but she was already pulling him back inside the kitchen, slamming the deadbolt, dragging him through the pantry into the tiny office that smelled of instant soup and old mop water. She pressed her back to the door as though the thin wood could stop bullets, and for a long moment simply breathing through, her mouth counting heartbeats the way people do after almost dying. "They know I'm here," she whispered finally, voice raw. "They always knew," Leonard answered. "They just wanted me to lead them to you." Astrid closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the fear was still there, but underneath it burned something harder. "Then listen carefully, because I will say this only once, and then we decide whether you leave here alive." She moved to the battered metal desk, opened the bottom drawer, and took out a small tin box that once held Danish butter cookies. Inside lay a child's silver necklace. Tiny dolphins linked together, the clasp worn smooth, and a folded legal document yellowed at the creases. She placed both in Leonard's trembling hands as though they were made of glass. "This boy," she said, "your son, is 6 years old. His mother was a junior conservator who worked for your father for 3 months in 2018. She discovered the first swap, threatened to go to the police, and disappeared the same week. They told me if I kept quiet, sold everything, vanished, and never used my real name again, the child would live. If I ever tried to find him, or if you ever came near me, they would send him to me in pieces." Leonard stared at the necklace as though it were a live wire. "I didn't know," he said, the words scraping out like broken glass. "I swear on everything I have left, I didn't know he existed until they showed me a photograph 3 months ago and said if I didn't help move the paintings, he would vanish the way his mother did." Astrid watched him for a long time, searching his face the way I once searched. Canvases for the tremor that betrays a forgery. Finally she nodded once, a small, decisive movement that carried the weight of every dollar she had ever earned, and every night she had cried herself to sleep in a rented room that smelled of cabbage. "Then you are going to help me get him back," she said quietly. "Silas is dangling the fake Monet to draw them out, but they will not settle for crumbs when they can have the Medusa. We have one chance, Leonard. One." She reached into the tin again and lifted something else, but instead of handing it over, she slipped it quickly into the inner pocket of her coat, buttoning the flap with fingers that no longer shook. Leonard saw the motion, saw the corner of the photograph disappear, but she met his eyes with such steady warning that he did not ask. "Later," she said, "when I know I can trust you with his face." "I will get him back," he said. And for the first time in years, his voice did not waver. "Whatever it costs me." Astrid studied him a moment longer, then reached past him and unbolted the door. Outside, the alley was empty, the black van already a ghost, but both of them knew it would return. She pressed the necklace and the document into his palm one final time, closing his fingers over them like a vow. "Then go," she whispered, "before they come back with something worse than photographs." Leonard stepped into the cold Boston dusk, carrying the weight of a son he had never held, while Astrid stayed behind the locked door, hand pressed to the pocket where the hidden photograph rested against her heart. The island had never felt so small. Every morning I walked the galleries with a clipboard and a weary smile, announcing that I had decided to rebalance the collection before the auditors arrive, and every afternoon another priceless canvas disappeared from its hook only to be replaced by a copy so perfect that even the dust looked authentic. I worked quickly, silently, using tricks I had learned hunting fakes in Beck, rooms from Marrakesh to Macau. A whisper of craquelure here, a microscopic bubble in the varnish there, the faint scent of linseed oil still wet enough to convince the nose. Karina watched me with growing alarm, her laughter becoming brittle, her hugs a fraction too tight, while Victor's calm cracked just enough for me to notice the tremor in his hand whenever he poured my coffee. By the 4th day I'd swapped 11 paintings, each one quietly crated and stored in the old cistern beneath the east wing where the temperature stays a perfect 58 degrees. The house began to feel like a stage set, waiting for the actors to realize the props were made of cardboard. Corina and Victor, poor frantic creatures, spent those same days trying to stuff the genie back into the bottle. I listened from doorways as Corina hissed into her phone in 3 different languages, begging the Geneva auction house to pause the lot just for a week, family emergency, while Victor sent increasingly desperate emails to the shipping agent after agent, claiming the crate had been damaged in transit, demanding it be returned unopened. Each refusal landed like a slap. I watched Victor's shoulders rise higher with every no. Watched Corina pace the terrace until the soles of her bare feet were black with crushed hibiscus. All the while, encrypted PDFs arrived on the burner phone. Leonard carried bank statements from the Caymans, incorporation papers for shell companies whose directors all shared the same Miami postal box, invoices for conservation services that exactly matched the dates my real paintings had vanished. At the bottom of every document, circled in red, was Corina's looping signature. Leonard's accompanying messages were short, almost gentle. She didn't know what she was signing half the time. They promised her the world and gave her a noose instead. I read them in the dark, heart pounding with something between rage and pity. On the 6th night, while lightning stitched purple seams across the sky, Corina finally cracked. She burst into the library where I sat, pretending to doze over a book of Dürer engravings, and fell to her knees beside my chair, tears shining on her cheeks like pearls. "Grandpa, please, call Geneva. Tell them the Monet was stolen from the crate. Tell them anything. If that lot goes to auction, everything collapses." I closed the book slowly, letting the silence stretch until it hurt. "Everything, little one?" I asked softly. She nodded, unable to speak. Behind her in the doorway, Victor hovered, face gray, eyes pleading. I reached out and brushed a tear from her cheek, with my thumb the way I had done when she was 7 and afraid of thunderstorms. "Then perhaps," I said, "it is time for things to collapse." The next afternoon, a small brown paper package, arrived by private courier, appeared on the veranda table while we took tea. No return address, only my name written in careful block letters. Corina and Victor were upstairs arguing in whispers. I heard their voices rise and fall like surf. I carried the package to the conservation studio, locked the door, and slit the tape with a scalpel. Inside lay a single 8x10 photograph, printed on glossy stock. The Medusa, my Caravaggio, photographed in perfect raking light that showed every crack and pentimento I knew by heart. But across the lower margin, embedded in the thick impasto where Perseus's sword met the neck, was something that had never been there before. A tiny, matte black rectangle no larger than a grain of rice, its edges catching the flash like a malevolent eye, a microchip. I stood frozen, scalpel still in hand, while the storm that had been threatening all week finally broke overhead and rain hammering, the skylight like thrown gravel, thunder shaking the very floor beneath my feet. I waited until the storm had fully set and the house had fallen into that heavy, humid silence that follows a day of rain before I summoned them both to the North Gallery, where the Medusa hung beneath its single spotlight like a judge waiting to deliver sentence. Corina arrived first, barefoot, wearing one of my old linen shirts as a nightdress, eyes swollen from crying. Victor followed too, respectful paces behind, still in his black suit as though he had never taken it off in 28 years. I did not ask them to sit. I simply laid the evidence across the long refectory table, the way a surgeon lays out instruments. The listening device in its plastic bag, the forged inventory photographs, the bank transfers bearing Corina's signature, the anonymous photograph of the Medusa with its impossible microchip. Then I waited. Corina broke first, of course. She walked straight to me, took my hands in hers, and sank to her knees on the rug. "Grandpa, I'm so sorry," she whispered, tears spilling faster than she could wipe them away. It started small. They called themselves an investment group, said they could triple the insurance values legally, that you would never have to sell anything, that when you were gone, I would be safe forever. I only signed papers. I never touched the paintings myself. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she pressed her forehead to my knuckles the way she did when she was 5 and had broken my wife's favorite teacup. Victor cleared his throat, the sound like dry leaves. "Sir," he said, eyes fixed on the floor, "Miss Karina came to me in distress 6 months ago. She was frightened, said powerful people would ruin her if she did not cooperate. She begged me to help move certain crates at night, to sign as witness on occasion. I believed I was protecting her, protecting the family. I see now I was only tightening the noose. I let the silence stretch until it hurt all 3 of us. Then I spoke, very softly. So you both confessed to conspiracy to commit insurance fraud on a scale that would imprison you for decades." Karina sobbed once, and Victor tilted his head. I should have felt triumphant, but instead I only felt the cold certainty that I'd been handed a beautifully wrapped lie. While they cried and confessed, my phone buzzed twice. A scanned document was the shipping contract for the wooden crate, containing my fake Monet sketch. The signature at the bottom, witnessed and notarized, belonged to Leonard. My son had personally hired the shipping company, paid the insurance, and routed the crate through channels that ensured it would be inspected by Lisbon Customs. He didn't just know about the bait. He set the bait himself. I stood in the shadows and felt the floor collapse beneath me. Karina and Victor were guilty, yes, but they were just the brushstrokes. Leonard was holding the palette knife. I stood motionless on the veranda, the rain falling in relentless sheets that blurred the line between sky and sea, while Leonard waited 2 steps below me, with water streaming from his coat like tears he could no longer afford to shed. The revelation hung between us heavier than the storm clouds overhead, and as lightning cracked the darkness, I finally found my voice, though it emerged rough and broken from a throat that felt strangled by betrayal. "You orchestrated this entire nightmare," I said slowly, each word measured against the pounding of my heart. "You manipulated Karina into signing those documents. You planted the listening device to make her seem guilty, and you hired the shipper for the fake Monet to draw them out while keeping your own hands clean." Leonard lifted his head, eyes meeting mine without flinching for the first time in years, and in that gaze I saw not defiance, but a desperation so profound it carved new lines into his face. "Dad, please listen," he pleaded, his voice carrying over the thunder with a raw honesty that cut deeper than any lie ever could. Karina was never the target. She was just the perfect cover because everyone sees her as your innocent little princess. I fed her just enough information to make her think she was building a future for us all. But every step was scripted by them, by the men who hold my son like a bargaining chip. "And Victor," I demanded, my tone sharpening like a blade. "Did you use him too? Or was he simply collateral in your grand deception?" Leonard shook his head, rain flinging from his hair. "Victor loves her like his own child. I knew he would follow wherever she led." I whispered in her ear about protecting the family legacy, and she pulled him in without even realizing how deep the water was. But none of it was real, Dad. The fraud, the swaps, the auction bait. It was all to get you to hand over the Medusa willingly, because that's what they need more than anything. The wind howled through the palms, whipping my robe against my legs, but I barely felt the chill as the pieces finally locked into place with a clarity that stole my breath. "You mean to tell me," I said, my voice rising above the storm, "that you sacrificed your own daughter's freedom, my trust, everything we've built, just to save a child or didn't even know existed until tonight. Yes, Leonard answered without hesitation, stepping closer until we were nearly touching. Because if I didn't cooperate, if I didn't play their game exactly as they demanded, they would kill him before sunrise. Astrid has kept him hidden for years, but they found him anyway. The microchip in that photo you received, it's proof of their entire operation, hidden in the painting by the boy's mother before they murdered her. They think you'll deliver it tomorrow night on the dock, thinking it's the real Medusa, and in exchange they'll hand over my son. But I can't let it end that way. I searched his face, looking for the lie that had defined our relationship for so long. But all I found was a father's anguish, mirroring my own from the night Clara died. Then what do you propose we do? I asked. Finally, my words heavy with the weight of decisions yet to be made. Leonard reached into his pocket and pulled out a small waterproof drive, holding it out like a lifeline. We replaced the microchip with a tracker. We deliver a fake painting rigged to broadcast their location to the authorities. Astrid is already on her way here with everything we need. But we have to act tonight before they realize I've turned. I took the drive from his trembling hand, feeling the cold metal warm against my palm. And for the first time in days, a spark of hope flickered amid the despair. Very well, I said, my voice steady now despite the chaos swirling around us. But if this fails, Leonard, if one hair on that boy's head is harmed, I will never forgive you. He nodded, relief flooding his features. It won't fail. I swear it on his life. We turned together toward the house, shoulders brushing in silent alliance, as the rain began to ease into a gentle mist that promised dawn. But far out on the dark water, where the mangroves whispered secrets to the tide, a sleek speedboat glided forward with its engines cut, its hull slicing silently through the waves, toward our private dock. The men aboard watched the veranda lights with patient, predatory eyes, their weapons loaded and ready. The day of the exchange dawned too bright, the kind of merciless Florida sunlight that makes every shadow look like a lie, and I spent it moving through the house like a ghost who had already died but forgotten to lie down. Leonard's final confession had stripped the last illusion from my eyes. Every step I had taken, since discovering the listening device, every clever swap of paintings, every tearful midnight plea from my granddaughter, had been guided by Leonard's hidden hand toward this single moment when I would carry the Medusa down to the dock and place it in the arms of murderers. He had used my trust the way a surgeon uses a scalpel, and the wound he left was so deep I could no longer tell where the pain ended and I began. I sat alone in the north gallery all afternoon, staring at the Caravaggio, while the snakes in Medusa's hair seemed to writhe more violently with every hour that passed. And I understood at last that the painting had never been the treasure. The treasure had always been the people I believed would protect it. Leonard had known that better than anyone. He had weaponized my love itself, turning my willingness to forgive, my need to save the innocent, my terror of losing the last fragments of family, into the perfect leash that led me straight to surrender. I was not merely betrayed. I had collaborated in my own betrayal because I had wanted so desperately to believe that my son could still be saved. By dusk, I could barely breathe. I walked the long veranda again and again, rehearsing the moment I would hand over the painting, picturing the child's face I had never seen, wondering whether the men in the speedboat would shoot me first or wait until the chip was in their hands. Leonard watched from the shadows of the salon, eyes red, saying nothing, because there was nothing left to say. Karina remained locked in her room, sedated by the pills Victor had quietly given her for the shock, and Victor himself moved through the corridors like a man already attending his own funeral. I had lost everything, and all that remained was the hollow certainty that tonight a 6-year-old boy would either live or die because an old man had loved too much and seen too little. At 11:30 I carried the Medusa, unwrapped as instructed, down the marble stairs and through the French doors toward the dock. the canvas heavier than it had ever been in 40 years. Leonard walked 3 paces behind me, silent, carrying only the satellite phone they had given him. The night was thick with the smell of rain-soaked jasmine and gun oil. We reached the long teak table on the terrace, where Victor usually served evening drinks, and I set the painting down for a moment to rest my arms. Leonard stood beside me, shoulders bowed, waiting for the tender that would bring his son and take my soul. That was when the French doors opened again. Victor stepped out carrying a second satellite phone that gleamed new and black in his gloved hand. He walked straight to the table, placed the phone beside the Medusa with the same calm precision he had used for 30 years ago when he served my wife her last cup of tea, and looked at me with eyes that held neither guilt nor triumph, only a terrible, exhausted certainty. "Sir," he said quietly, "they are ready for you now." The terrace felt suddenly colder than the night air could explain, as though the moon itself had drawn back in horror at what I believed Victor had become. I stared at the satellite phone resting beside the Medusa like a black spider, and every year of trust collapsed into dust inside my chest. Victor met my eyes without flinching and spoke in the same measured voice he had used for 3 decades. "Sir, before you condemn me, please allow me 1 minute, because the story you have been told tonight is missing the final page. And if we do not turn it together, the boy will die and every sacrifice will have been wasted." Leonard took a half-step forward, face twisted in confusion and fury. "Victor, what the hell?" But Victor raised one gloved hand, the smallest gesture, and Leonard fell silent the way he had never done for me. "I have been playing a part since the day Karina first came to me weeping about mysterious men who promised her safety," Victor continued quietly, never looking away from my gaze. "I let her believe she was manipulating me. Let her believe I was the weak old man who would sign anything to protect her, because only that way could I watch every move Leonard made behind her. I recorded every call, copied every document, and sent everything to the only place it could still help, the federal task force that has been hunting this syndicate for 6 years. He reached into his jacket and drew out a thin flash drive that caught the moonlight like a sliver of ice. "The microchip in the Medusa is not the syndicate's insurance policy," he said. "It is Leonard's, 5 years ago, when the boy's mother realized she would not survive. She begged Leonard to finish what she started. He has been working under deep cover ever since, feeding the government evidence while pretending to be exactly the greedy, broken son they expected. Every forgery, every tear Karina shed, every desperate plea Leonard made to you was theater to convince the syndicate that he was finally delivering the painting they have killed for." Leonard's shoulders sagged. He looked suddenly 20 years older. "I wanted to tell you," he whispered. "I wanted to every single day, but if they ever suspected I was playing them, the boy would be dead before sunrise." Victor placed the flash drive beside the satellite phone. "The chip in the frame is a duplicate. The real evidence has already been transmitted. Tonight, the syndicate believes they are collecting the last loose thread. Instead, they are walking into a live federal net." I stood frozen, the Caravaggio in my arms, heavier than sin, while the pieces I had mourned as betrayal rearranged themselves into the most exquisite forgery of all. Leonard had not used my trust to destroy me. He had used it to save a child I did not yet know I had, and to bring down monsters who had murdered for pigment and varnish. The laughter started somewhere low in my chest, a cracked, disbelieving sound that grew until it echoed off the water and startled the night birds from the mangroves. I laughed until tears ran down my face, until Leonard reached out as though to steady me, until Victor's calm mask finally fractured into the faintest, weary smile. I wiped my eyes with the sleeve of my robe and looked at the 2 men who had carried my grief and my hope for longer than I deserved, and I said, voice shaking with joy and terror in equal measure, "Then let us give them the performance of their lives." The four of us gathered in the conservation studio just after sunset, the room lit only by the green glow of the work lamps and the distant flicker of heat lightning over the Gulf. Astrid had arrived an hour earlier, slipping onto the island in a small fishing skiff she abandoned at the public marina, her hair cropped short and dyed dark, eyes carrying 5 years of sleepless nights. She greeted me with the briefest embrace. Karina remained upstairs under gentle sedation. Some truths are too sharp to be faced all at once. Victor spread the tools across the long table. Like a surgeon, a fresh canvas the exact size of the Medusa, pigments I had ground myself decades ago, a hairdryer, ultraviolet lamps, and a hollowed-out stretcher into which he carefully inserted a military-grade transmitter, no larger than a matchbox. We worked in near silence, the way men and women work when they know the next hours will decide whether a child lives or dies. I painted the forgery stroke by stroke, copying every crack, every pentimento, every microscopic bubble in the varnish until even I could not tell which Medusa was real. Without touching the surface, Astrid wired the transmitter to a satellite, uplink hidden inside the frame. Victor lined the back with lead foil so the device would remain invisible to handheld scanners. Leonard watched from the doorway, hands clenched so tightly his knuckles shone white, saying nothing because everything that needed saying had already been carved itself into his face. We agreed on the plan with the calm of people who had nothing left to lose. No police. Leonard would walk onto the dock, carrying the easy, fake Medusa, acting every inch the broken, obedient son delivering the prize. I would remain on the terrace, visible but unarmed, the grieving father who had finally surrendered. Victor would monitor the satellite feed from the library. Astrid would wait in the shadows with a second boat we kept hidden under the boathouse. Tarp, engine warmed, ready to intercept the moment the child appeared. At 11:40, we carried the trap painting down, the path lit only by moonlight and the small red beacon Leonard had been instructed to leave, burning. Astrid slipped away without a word, melting into the darkness the way only someone who had lived invisible for half a decade could manage. Victor took his position behind the library, shutters, headset already in place. I stood at the terrace rail with Leonard beside me, the weight of the fake Caravaggio suddenly light in my arms, as though the painting itself understood it was about to become bait. Leonard turned to me one last time. "I know I can never undo what I put you through," he said, voice rough. "But if this works, the boy lives, the syndicate falls, and maybe one day you can look at me without hating what you see." I rested my hand on his shoulder, feeling the tremor running through him. "Bring my grandson home," I answered. "That will be enough." He nodded once, took the painting from me, and walked down the path toward the dock, where the black speedboat already waited, running lights extinguished, only the faint glint of weapons visible when lightning flickered across the water. I watched him descend the steps, canvas held high so they could see it from the boat, the perfect image of a defeated man delivering the final piece of his soul. He paused at the edge of the dock, looked back toward the house and gave the smallest nod we had rehearsed. Then he stepped onto the tender that had come to fetch him. He did not see Astrid crouched behind the half-open closet door of the boathouse, finger on the throttle of the second engine, eyes fixed on the black water where her child waited. The moon hung low and silver over the water when Leonard stepped onto the dock, the fake Medusa held high like an offering. 3 men waited in the black speedboat and, between them, bound to the rail with silver duct tape across his mouth, sat a small boy with Leonard's dark hair and Astrid's frightened eyes. Leonard's voice did not shake when he spoke. Painting for the child. No tricks. The leader, a thick-necked man with a Serbian accent, motioned, and one of his men took the canvas while the other sliced the tape from the boy's wrists. The child stumbled forward, crying silently, and Leonard dropped to his knees to catch him, wrapping him in arms that had waited 6 years for this moment. For 3 heartbeats the night held its breath. Then the leader turned the painting to the running light, pried at the frame with a knife, and found the transmitter instead of the microchip he expected. His roar of rage was cut short by the sudden, deafening whine of every speaker on his boat, coming alive at once. Every recorded conversation, every ledger, every photograph of murdered conservators and laundered millions poured out across the open. Channeled in 7 languages, broadcasting live to Interpol, the FBI, and every news outlet the task force had on speed dial. The men froze, faces draining of color as they realized the trap had already sprung. At that exact instant, Astrid's second boat shot out from beneath the boathouse like a white arrow, engine screaming. She came alongside so fast the wake rocked the speedboat violently. Leonard lifted the boy across the gap into her waiting arms, then vaulted after them. Gunfire cracked. Victor's calm voice spoke once more through the speakers, gentle and final. Weapons down. You are surrounded by water and evidence. There is nowhere left to run. Red and blue lights appeared on the horizon, closing the circle. The syndicate men dropped their guns one by one as helicopters thundered overhead, spotlights pinning them like insects. Later, when the boy slept curled against Astrid's lap in the library and Karina finally woke to learn she had been a pawn and not a villain, when Victor poured real tea with hands that no longer shook, Leonard stood before me in handcuffs that were already being removed because the prosecutor had agreed to full immunity for his years undercover. He could not meet my eyes. I took his face in both my hands and spoke the only words that mattered. I do not forgive you for the pain you caused. Me, I said. I forgive you for the pain you were willing to carry so that child could live. That is the difference between betrayal and redemption. He wept then, the way grown men rarely weep, and I held him the way I had not held him since. He was smaller than the boy now sleeping upstairs. 6 months later, the mansion opened its doors as the Thorn Foundation for At-Risk Children. The galleries rang with voices instead of silence. The lawns filled with laughter instead of secrets. Astrid runs the finances with the same brilliance she once used to hide from the world. Leonard, after a short, symbolic sentence and full pardon, teaches art to teenagers who have never known a safe home. Karina, healed and humbled, brings them lemon cake every Sunday and calls Victor Uncle Vic again without irony. And I walk the halls with my grandson Small, hand in mine while he points at colors he cannot yet name, asking if the paintings are happy to have so many children looking at them. They are. For the first time in centuries, the masterpieces are exactly where they belong. Some nights I still wake reaching for Clara's hand, but now another small hand finds mine in the dark, and I remember that forgiveness is not the absence of pain. It is what we build with the pieces after the eye storm, and the storm at long last is over. And now, it is just you and me again. The lights in the gallery are off. The house is quiet, and little Matteo is finally asleep upstairs, with his new puppy curled against his feet. I'm sitting here in the dark, the same place where this whole story began, thinking about every tear you cried with me, every time you whispered, "Don't trust him," or "She's going to break his heart." Every time you stayed with me until the very last second because you needed to know the family would be whole again. Thank you. From the bottom of this old man's heart, thank you for walking through the storm with us. If even one moment touched you, if you felt seen, if you remembered your own sacrifices that nobody noticed, please leave me a comment below. Tell me your city. Tell me your name. Tell me the wound you carry that still waits for justice. I read every single one, and I answer as many as these tired eyes allow. We are family here. Your stories matter to me. If this story gave you comfort tonight, if it reminded you that love can survive even the ugliest lies, please consider sending a super thanks. Every dollar is a hug across the screen. On your screen right now, you will see 2 new, real-life stories I chose especially for you. Watch them, cry with them, And when you are ready, come back. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the little bell so you never miss the next bedtime story. There are so many more waiting. I will be here in this same chair, waiting for you. With all my love and respect, Silas. See you in the comments, my dear friend. Sleep gently tonight. You are not alone.